It may seem strange in some ways to have a speaker representing a religious tradition, or speaking of several religious traditions, as I will do today, at a conference such as this. For clearly it would seem the problem we are here to discuss is a scientific one. We've heard this morning, and in fact for many years, how science and technology and their byproducts are damaging our lives. They are dirtying and poisoning our air, our water, our land, and our bodies. The byproducts of our scientific advancement are eliminating species from the earth, and almost all agree overheating our climate, thus melting our glaciers, igniting wildfires, flooding our cities, and holding back the nourishing rains upon which all life depends. We watch as our planet, our home, becomes uninhabitable for our species and our children. So clearly, this is a scientific problem, and we call upon science and the governments that fund those sciences and legalize those technologies to do something. Problem solved. They need to do something. Let the rest of us go home. But the problems are not so simple as research and technology. A knife is a simple form of technology. It is a primitive tool created to serve us. But is the knife good for us or bad for us? In the hands of an expert surgeon, a knife saves lives, restores sight, removes cancers, and brings hope. In the hands of a criminal, a knife destroys. It inflicts pain. It steals life. So is the knife good or bad? Is the manufacturer of the knife a criminal or a saint? The answer to this question clearly depends upon the use of the knife. It can be good or evil, depending upon the hand that yields it. More importantly, whether the knife is good or bad depends upon the behavior and the consciousness, the heart of those that hold it. We praise and pray for the help of the surgeon. We run in fear from the knife-wielding aggressor. In a similar way, while the misuse or overuse or abuse of science seems to be at the heart of our problem, the crisis of our environment, a thoughtful person sees that the root of the problem is deeper. When there is disease in the body, an untrained eye sees only the symptoms. When there is fever, there is pain, there is mental disturbance, externals only. Oh, I have a boil. Let me blow on it to relieve the discomfort. A trained expert, however, a more intelligent person, a wiser person, sees the deeper cause, sees the root cause of the illness, and works to alleviate that sickness. It is for this reason, perhaps, that Pope Francis, in his recent encyclical, Laudato Si, Be Praised, on the care of our common home, did not simply direct his words to the governments or the scientists or the industrialists of the world, nor, as the leader of the Christian Catholic world, did he write to the bishops of his church, the standard practice in writing papal encyclicals. Instead, he stated that his 42,000-word treatise was written, quote, to every person on the planet. Why? Pope Francis said that he wrote to, quote, urgently appeal for a new dialogue about how we are all shaping the future of our planet, end quote. In other words, the problem we face is not just one of science or technology. It is a question of how we see the world, how we treat, care for, or exploit the world, how we share the world, at what needs to be a shared decision how we will live together on this earth. As the Pope said, there is, quote, needed a change in lifestyle, production, and consumption, end quote. But can we do so? And more importantly, how to do so? A few years ago, I live in Washington, D.C. in the United States. I was listening to a radio program where a panel of experts was discussing the cause of a great financial collapse, later labeled the Great Recession, brought about in part by overextension of credit and overheating of the mortgage industry, etc. Among other issues, too many houses were being sold to people that couldn't afford them. And when the bubble burst, it affected the whole global economy. The various experts on this radio show were pointing out shortcomings in the government's oversight, the need for new laws regulating banks, the errors of the various economists that should have been seeing the problems coming, and so forth. The final panelist, however, saw it differently, and he said, all these factors are contributing elements, but at its core, this problem has one simple cause, and we all know what it is: greed. Too many people squeeze too much money out of a series of financial exchanges. In the end, the system collapsed. In the same way, across the earth, we are trying to squeeze too much from our planet. We are cutting too much, polluting too much, killing too much, and consuming too much. As Pope Francis said, it is a question of lifestyle, production, and consumption. There's a simple cartoon series called Pogo, you may know it. In it, the lovable bear character one time famously said, "We have met the enemy, and it is us." So too with the environmental crisis. The problem is more than science, more than technology. The problem is not the knife. The problem is the holder of the knife. The problem is us. And the solution lies with us. And that is where religion must come in. Again, from Pope Francis, he writes, we must consider, quote, the many philosophical, theological, and cultural causes of our environmental crisis. The causes of the environmental crisis run deep, and it is the religious leaders of our society who can best point to the problem in our hearts, in our lifestyles, in our greed, and call upon each of us to take personal responsibility, as some of our earlier speakers have, for the ill effects of our actions. Religion and religious leaders have a major role to play in cleaning up our world, for they help us to set priorities, to see the world through philosophical and compassionate eyes. It is the religious leaders who remind us of the need for concern for others, including our entire planet. Their voice reminds us that it is a wise man or woman, does not, as Jesus said, lay up, quote, treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy. In other words, only in selfish pursuits and in unlimited consumption. But instead, a wise person makes decisions based on other, higher priorities. But are we ready to listen? The Islamic Declaration on Global Climate Change, put forth from the International Islamic Climate Change Symposium, put it in this way, quote, we recognize the corruption that humans have caused on earth due to our relentless pursuit of economic growth and consumption, end quote. In their document, this group of esteemed Islamic thinkers quoted the Quran, where it is stated, O children of Adam, eat and drink, but waste not by excess, for Allah loveth not the wasters. The World Jewish Congress gives reference to Scripture in their statement on the environment. They tell us that in Leviticus, God says, for the earth is mine. Not that the earth belongs to mankind to be exploited at random. It is a gift of God to be cherished and protected. As the authors of that statement go on to say, this Jewish organization, Quote, man is commanded not to spoil creation, but rather improve and perfect it. Man's rights in property are restricted. He may not use his possessions, in this context the earth, in ways likely to harm others. These Jewish leaders also quote the book of Ecclesiastes, where it said, quote, consider the work of God, for who can make that straight which man has made crooked? In short, to address the climate crisis, we must address the root cause of the problem. That root, as our Jewish, Muslim, and Christian brothers and sisters have pointed out, lies in our collective pollution of the heart, our endless desire to consume the resources of this world, resources that are fast giving out and being used up. And let's be frank here. This endless consumption does little or nothing to appease the hankering of our heart. We seek to consume more and more and more at whatever cost because we feel a need, a striving, a hankering for happiness, for satisfaction within. All people have a need and a right to enjoy the basic necessities of food, shelter, education, security, and all peoples and all governments of the world have a duty to see that those needs are provided for all people. But here we deal with a different problem. Here we are discussing the seemingly endless desire for consumption that now drives the lives and minds of people from Mumbai to Manchester, from New York to New Delhi. Therefore, in addition to new technologies that are needed and need to be implemented to reduce our water consumption, our destruction of the air and land and of other species, we need a change of heart and a change of vision. And that is the domain of religion. Like our Christian, Muslim, and Jewish friends, and many other religious traditions as well, my tradition, the Vedic tradition, or more specifically the Vaishnava Hindu tradition, tells us that the earth is the property of God. It is not up for grabs for the strongest exploiter. The earth and our lives have a purpose. In my tradition, the Sri Ishopanishad guides us in this way: Ishyavasham idam sarvam. Everything, animate and inanimate, within this world is owned and controlled by the Lord. Knowing this, one should only accept those things which are necessary for oneself, which are set aside as one's quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. On the negative side, the Vedas also teach us of karma, of the law of action and reaction. As the Bible tells us, as you sow, so shall ye reap. We certainly see the truth of this wisdom, as today we are all reaping the reactions of environmental destruction sown many years before. And our actions or inaction today will reap effects far into the future and onto future generations. We need to make a change, but we seem to be unable to do so. How to make such a change? It begins with vision. I suggest a spiritual vision. The great religious traditions of the world teach us many things and offer us much to help in our environmental hour of need. Let us learn from them and let us see religion as a friend. Let us open our minds to these great sources of knowledge, and let us call on religious leaders, spiritual leaders, to draw from their own traditions to help guide us out of our current crisis. Let me highlight just 3 such teachings that I believe can show us a new way, but a proven way forward. First, compassion. To address the environmental issues we face, we need to develop compassion, a sense of concern for the species that we are destroying, the forests that we are cutting, the animals that we are exploiting, and the children of the future whose lives we are impacting. The religions of the world teach us this compassion, how to cultivate compassion, how to soften our hearts with spiritual knowledge, a vision of the soul, love for our fellow human beings and all creatures, and indeed for Mother Earth. Unrestrained and soulless development needs a counterbalance, and that balance is spiritual knowledge and compassion. Compassion and sustainability. 2, self-discipline. To solve the environmental crisis will take self-discipline. We need to individually and collectively learn to say no. Just as an intelligent person says no to the destructive habits of addictive drugs, so too we need to cultivate the determination to say no to our self-destructive habits of overconsumption and environmental exploitation. No, sometimes, to the newest fads when our current home, clothes, car, and other amenities will do just fine. No to the advertising industries that want to turn each of us into machines of consumption. And to be willing to compromise with other nations and other peoples to see what is good for all, not just the good of my own family, tribe, nation, or even species. The great wisdom traditions help us cultivate such self-discipline through prayer, through study, through meditation, and yoga. 3, and I'll close with this, alternatives. The great religious teachers and teachings offer us an alternative. We are driven to our destructive or harmful habits because we think we are bettering ourselves by endlessly exploiting the earth. It's not mindless, it's just not well understood, our current path. But such a senseless and foolish ideology only leads to frustration and despair. But what choice do we have? Religion and spiritual knowledge offer us a choice, another path, an alternative. As the Bhagavad Gita claims, param drištva nivartate, we are all meant to experience a higher taste, a spiritual, divine, internal happiness that quenches the thirst of the heart and of the mind and of the soul. This is what human society needs. This is what we seek. And when that alternative is found out, the passion, the greed, and the selfishness that drives our current destructive behaviors and the environmental crisis will diminish, and our planet can again flourish. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.